Hi, everyone. Welcome. Hello, PT teachers and aspiring PT teachers from wherever you may be in the world. I'm calling today from London. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Magda, and I'm the Global Pearson Test of English Teacher Training Manager. So I work with teachers all around the world who are teaching PTE, but also those who are thinking about starting out as PTE teachers. So you are all very welcome. This is actually the 8th webinar in our I Teach PTE series. We have them monthly, so I'll tell you a little bit more at the end of this webinar about the next. So I'm going to be the host for this session, but soon I'll introduce you to our presenter today, Dawn. But just before I hand over to Dawn, I just want to talk through a few housekeeping rules, if I may. So the first is that we have an hour scheduled for this webinar, so we'll try to finish promptly on the hour. The chat box has actually been disabled, but the Q&A is very much working. So what I ask is two things. Could you just find the Q&A? It should be at the bottom of your screen, and just give me a quick hello, perhaps where you're from, just to say hi and test the Q&A function. That would be great. And the second thing is, if a question pops in your head, it is better to ask it live than to leave it to the very end, because then there may be a danger that we don't get to it. What I'm going to do while Dawn is speaking is try and answer some of those questions. So it's a great way for you to basically converse with me during Dawn's presentation. Okay, so the temperature is very, very, very warm today in London, and I'm going to pass over to Dawn, who I think is based in the United Arab Emirates, so probably a little bit hotter where you are, Dawn. Over to you.
Thanks, Magda. And I can confirm that it certainly is a little bit hotter than 30 degrees here. I'm not sure quite how much hotter it is, but certainly higher than that. So thank you, Magda, for that lovely introduction. Welcome to all of you who've joined us here today for the I Teach PTE Listening webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. So as Magda said, my name is Dawn. I am based in the United Arab Emirates. I live in Dubai. Just a little bit of information about me. I have worked as an English language teacher for a number of years internationally. So I've done that. I've also worked as a translator as well. So extremely passionate about languages, both English and other languages as well. I've been at Pearson now for over 1 year, so really enjoying my time at Pearson so far. I'm a PTE master trainer. I have a passion for lifelong learning, so I believe that no matter what age you are, you can always learn something new. You're never too old to stop learning. And I offer practical support for the whole PTE test-taking experience, which is why I'm with you today. And obviously today we're specifically talking about how we can make the listening part of the test more accessible, and to give you some tips and advice on how you can help your learners as well. So yeah, let's get started. So in terms of the webinar objectives, so firstly, I'm going to introduce the structure and question types of the PTE listening section. So we'll start with that. Next, we're going to identify some common challenges that our learners face. And we're also going to provide you with some activities that you can try with your learners to assist with these listening question types. And then lastly, we're going to look at Pearson resources for PTE listening and how you can use those to help prepare your learners in the classroom. So just an outline there of what we'll be doing during the webinar. So let's continue with an introduction to PTE listening. For those of you not aware, part 3 of PTE Academic and also part 3 of PTE Core, I'm aware that we have trainers in the webinar with us today that are also teaching PTE Core. Maybe some of you are teaching both. So part 3 is the one that focuses on listening, and that's the one that we are going to solely be looking at today in detail. So the listening section is designed to assess your understanding of real-world spoken English. So what do we mean by real-world spoken English, and how do we integrate that into the design? So firstly, you can see integrated skills. So many of the question types assess more than one language skill. So some question types will be assessing listening and writing, or the listening and reading, for example. And the aim of this is to reflect how we use English in real life. So on a day-to-day basis, when we're communicating, we're not using one skill. You know, even if I'm talking to someone, I'm speaking and I'm listening at the same time. Next, in terms of authentic texts, the recordings that are included in the listening section are adapted from real-world sources, whether that be academic, general, or professional. And again, the aim behind this is that we're providing our learners with relevant exposure to English. So English that they would encounter in real life. It's not English that has been, you know, doctored or compromised or factored. It's real English that they would encounter in all different realms of their lives. And then lastly, classroom alignment. And so the idea behind this is that the variety of the question types, they're testing, obviously, as I mentioned, a range of listening skills, but we are hoping that this aligns with what many of you are already doing in the classroom. So we already hope that some of the skills we're going to mention today, we're already hoping that you are working towards some of these with your learners to align what you're doing in the classroom with what will be expected of them in the listening section of the test. Okay, moving on from this. Okay, so this part, I quite like this part. So challenges learners face when listening to real English. I like it for a number of reasons, because it's reflective. It's something that I think many of us can relate to. I'm sure many of you in the webinar today have learned English yourselves, in which case you can remember, you know, think back to challenges that you yourselves faced when you were learning English and when you were listening to real English. So you can put yourselves in the shoes of your students or your learners. And likewise, anyone else. So I, for example, have learned Spanish. And so I'm also aware of challenges that I faced when I was learning a second language, and how that related to listening, you know, problems that I encountered when I was listening to Spanish. So the first one is not recognizing grammar, vocabulary, or pronunciation. So that can be a challenge that learners face. Also, the next one, struggling to understand language in discourse. So very often we might understand a word or an item of vocabulary, but do we understand it in context, or in use? If we've learned it in an isolated way, and perhaps that word could have one or more meanings. So sometimes that's a struggle for learners too. The next one I think is quite important. So limited background knowledge on the topic. So you could be extremely fluent in English, but if your knowledge of the topic is somewhat limited, then that could also affect your performance if you're expected to comprehend and deduct an answer from what you're listening to. The next one, features of natural speech. So for example, weak forms can make comprehension harder at times, and we're going to look at that later on. Overlooking contextual clues can also be a challenge that the learners face as well. And the last one, again, very relatable to all of us. If learners are tired, if they're fatigued, or if they don't feel very confident about a particular element of the exam or a test, of course that's going to affect their performance. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to really increase our learners' confidence, so that when they do enter that exam, we're giving them the best possibility of performing to their best ability. So that's what we're hoping for. So let's take a little look at the question types that score for listening. So you can see on this slide here that some question types score on more than one language skill. So I mentioned this to you before in terms of integrated skills. And this is an example of this. So you can see, for example, so part 3, as I mentioned, is the listening part. You can see for summarized spoken text, which is highlighted in bold, you can see that students are scored both on listening, but they're also scored on writing as well. Likewise, for fill in the blanks, you can see that they are scored on listening and writing again. Highlight correct summary, which is highlighted in purple there. You can see that they are scored for listening and also reading. And lastly, highlight incorrect words. You can see scored for listening and also for reading as well. Just one thing to note, for those of you who are more focused on teaching PTE core, the highlight correct summary question type does not apply to you, as it does not feature in PTE core. Okay, so we're now going to move on to some general PTE listening classroom recommendations. So these are some recommendations that could apply to all PTE listening question types. So the first one, I think very relatable again, I'm sure all of the trainers will agree. We can train our learners to recognize and focus on key instruction phrases, such as you will need to select more than one response, or click on the paragraph that best relates to the recording. And the reason why we want them to focus on this is that so they understand exactly what is being asked of them and can respond accurately. I'm sure many of you who've taught before or in your training experiences have encountered instances where your learners have not read the instructions correctly and therefore they have not performed accurately in the exam. And obviously this does affect their confidence. So we're hoping that by getting them to focus on key instruction phrases, it will give them once again a better opportunity of performing well in the exam because they know exactly what they are listening for, they know what is expected of them. The next one, so train our learners to quickly skim through questions or answer choices before the audio starts. Again, the idea behind this is activating our students, activating our learners, priming them to focus by highlighting what to listen for. So they could be listening for key vocabulary, for example, specific information. And so we want them to be aware of what it is they're actively listening for before that audio starts. And one way to do that is quickly skimming through the questions or answer choices. Okay, the next tip, which I would recommend as well, is train our learners to expand their vocabulary and recognize common collocations. So some collocations, for example, you can see here on the slide, take responsibility, make a decision. You may be able to deduce the meaning from those. However, we know that other collocations are not as simple as that and may require a deeper understanding, a deeper knowledge. So try to expand your students' vocabulary and their awareness of these collocations, and also make sure that, you know, at the same time we're paying attention to grammar structures and correct pronunciation. So some advice there on some things that you should look out for and try to encourage your learners to do. Okay, so now we're going to look at 3 listening question types in more detail. So we're going to be covering summarized spoken text, highlight correct summary, and the last one will be write from dictation. So these are the 3 that we're now going to cover. So let's begin with summarized spoken text. Okay, so just an overview of this question type. So the prompt length, so in other words, the recording that they will hear, it varies here between PTE A, which is PTE Academic, and PTE C, which is PTE Core. So you can see for PTE Academic, the prompt length is between 60 and 90 seconds. However, for PTE Core, you can see that's slightly less at 45 to 75 seconds. In terms of the task, so the learners will listen to the recording, after which they will then be required to write a summary. And so you can see once again, there are some differences to bear in mind here. So for PTE Academic, the summary will be between 50 and 70 words. However, for PTE Core, the summary will be between 20 and 30 words. And then moving on to skills assessment and scoring. I mentioned about these question types having more than one skill. And so you can see here for summarized spoken text, their listening skills are being assessed as well as their writing skills. And one thing to be aware of too is that there is partial credit awarded for this question type. And I will show you an example of this on the following slide. So partial credit, for those of you who are not aware of this term, it means that learners will receive a score for a partly correct answer. So as you can see here in bold, down the left-hand side, you can see that for PT Academic, the traits scored are content, form, grammar, vocabulary, and spelling. And you can also see that the range of scores goes from 0 through to 2. So 0 being the lowest score and 2 being the highest score. So yeah, the partial score refers to the fact that even if they, for example, as you can see here, they commit one spelling error, they will still be awarded for what they have written, which is correct. One thing I would like to draw your attention to here, though, is the word limit or the word count. This is quite important. So you can see that there may be a tendency from some learners to think that if they write more, they will score a higher score. But you can see here that they are very strict or very direct when it comes to the word count. So if they write actually fewer than 50 words, they will be marked down, and if they write more than 70 words, they will be marked down as well. So make sure that your students are aware of this to avoid them losing points unnecessarily, because they think that, they believe that if they write more, they may be awarded more points for that. And then moving on to the next slide. So you can see this is for PTE Core. Everything is the same essentially here. So you can see the content, form, grammar, vocabulary, spelling, nothing new here in terms of the partial credit and the way it's scored. The only difference here is when it comes to the word limit, where you can see that the word limit is less. So with fewer words for PTE Core. So between 20 and 30 for a full credit response. And then, as I mentioned before, if they go under the word limit, they will be marked down a point. If they go over the word limit, they will also be marked down a point as well. Okay, and then moving on to sub-skills. So I'm not sure if this is something that any of you have considered, perhaps some of you have. So I mentioned the fact that these question types have integrated skills. So we've mentioned already listening and writing being the two applicable here. I'm just going to give you a moment to look at some of the sub-skills there as well. So here we've got some sub-skills required for listening. So please take a moment to look at those. And then if we move on to the following slide, so this time we've got the sub-skills, but for writing. So I'll also give you a moment just to familiarize yourselves with those as well. So these are sub-skills that we should also be focused on, not just the core skills, such as listening and writing, but these sub-skills that are very important as well. Okay, hopefully everyone had a chance to skim those and have a look. Okay, moving on. So we're going to look at some common mistakes to look out for with this particular question type. So common mistakes to look out for with summarized spoken text. So two that we're going to look at are not identifying the main points, and the second one is errors in paraphrasing. So errors or mistakes when it comes to writing something in your own words. So let's have a look at some suggestions here. So for the not identifying the main points, we can get learners to listen for the main ideas. We can also get them to take effective notes. And we can also make sure that they are able to identify what is needed for an effective summary. So this last one, in my opinion, is very important. You may find that some learners are not aware of what constitutes a good summary. As I mentioned before, there is a tendency at times to to write too many words. And the nature of a summary is that it should be concise, it should be accurate, it should contain the main ideas. But sometimes learners are not aware of this, and they have the temptation to put everything in there. So make sure your learners are aware of what is needed for an effective summary. And then when it comes to errors in paraphrasing, you can get your learners to paraphrase the language form from the recording. So, for example, when they're listening, you can get them to write what they hear in their own words. This is helping them practice that skill. And then the next one, you can get them to experiment with range. What do we mean by range? Well, we know that English is quite a rich language. There are many ways of saying the same thing, and we have lots of beautiful idiomatic expressions as well. So if, for example, in the recording, the speaker said very hot, perhaps you could introduce your students to other ways that they can say that, such as boiling, scorching, roasting. So we're just showing them different ways they can say the same thing, but in a way that's not repeating exactly what they've just heard. And then the last one, which I think is equally important, is proofreading for accuracy. Again, it depends on your learners and their learning styles, but very often they may not be in the habit of proofreading their own work, making sure that their summary is correct. There might be spelling mistakes in there, punctuation mistakes. So we want to encourage this practice where when they have produced something, they reflect on what they've produced and they are looking for any mistakes they might have made, and they're ready to correct those. Okay, let me move on to the following slide. So here we've got an activity, so a classroom activity for summarized spoken text. So we thought this classroom activity would be something nice for you to try to help your students with this particular question type. So the classroom activity, it is raising awareness of note-taking. So we know note-taking is not exclusive to English. We're aware that obviously people around the world take notes. If you go shopping, you make notes, you make a shopping list before you go shopping to remind you of what you need to buy. So we know that probably our learners already have some ideas of how to take notes, but we want to make them more effective note takers. So here's an idea that we've got for you. It's called a note-taking checklist. It can be used individually for self-correction, or it could also be used for group activities as a peer correction checklist. And you can see the various items on the checklist there ready to be checked off. And the idea behind the activity is that you would play a 60 to 90 second recording. Again, we are making sure that the length of the recording reflects the length of the recording that they would find in PTE Academic. Therefore, for those of you who are training students or training learners on PTE Core, please make sure that your recording is 45 to 75 seconds long, as we know that the recording is shorter for that particular test. You would then share the note-taking checklist with your learners, and you would ask them to think about which of these do they already use. So perhaps they already use abbreviations when they take notes, as I said, both in English or in their mother tongue, their first language. Perhaps when they text, for example, I'm sure sometimes they use abbreviations and they use those in notes as well. Maybe they already use headings or bullet points when they're taking notes. So we want to raise some awareness of what they're currently using, but then also we want to introduce some that they might not have thought of. So once we've done that, we're then going to play the recording for them, and we're going to get them to take notes using as many of these strategies as possible. And then following that, we're then going to, as I said, you can do this individually or in pairs, depending on how you want to structure the activity. They're going to evaluate the effectiveness of their notes. So they're going to, for example, I would pass my notes to my fellow learner and they would pass theirs to me. And I would take a look at their notes and I would look at the checklist and just, have they used abbreviations? Are those abbreviations easy for me to understand? Have they used bullet points? Have they spelt things correctly? So it's an exchange where I'm checking for them, they're checking for me. At the same time, we're raising further awareness. And then what you can do at the end as well is you can repeat the activity one more time with the same recording in the hope that this time their notes are a lot more effective than the last time, because we've gone through this activity and we've equipped them with some strategies that they can use. Moving on to the next question type. So this time we've got highlight correct summary. A little overview again of what this question type contains. So the prompt length, so again, the recording that they will hear is 30 to 90 seconds long. The task, so after listening to a recording, learners will then select the paragraph that they think best summarizes the recording. So they'll be given a choice of paragraphs and they have to select the best one. The skills assessment here and the scoring, so it will be listening and reading that's being assessed, so those two skills. And just to make you aware as well, there is no partial credit here, so it will either be a 1 if they select the correct paragraph, or a 0 if it's an incorrect paragraph. So no partial credit awarded for this particular question type. Again, moving on to sub-skills, you may have thought about these already, you may have not. So again, listening is what they're assessed on, and reading is what they're assessed on as well. However, within those two, we've got the listening and reading sub-skills. Again, I will just give you a moment to read through these. So please take a look. So hopefully you've managed to digest some of that and to read through. But yeah, just to emphasize again, it is important that we are looking at these sub skills and that we're not just looking at the main skills, because you know there's lots to unpack here, lots of other things that we are looking for in terms of their performance. So we need to be targeting these as well. Okay, and some common mistakes to look for this time with highlight correct summary. So you can see the two there on the slides. The first one is reading at the wrong time. And then the second one is assessment mistakes. So let's have a look at reading at the wrong time. So we could get our learners to skim the summaries. So they could skim the summaries quickly before the audio begins. So this will help them to know what their options are before they actually start actively listening. We could also encourage them to listen and take notes. As they're taking notes, they will get a better idea as well of which summary would be the most adequate, the one that fits the best. And then lastly, we can get our learners to compare the summaries to the notes. So which of those summaries that I'm presented with best matches my notes? And hopefully the one that best matches my notes is the correct summary. Moving on to assessment mistakes. So we could get our learners to assess all the options. So if they're provided with a number of paragraphs, they should make sure that they're considering all of them and not just randomly selecting, you know, the first one that they come to. They're considering them properly. And also they can use what's called a process of elimination. I'm sure most of you are aware of this. For any kind of multiple choice question type, this is a really good technique to use, where we're encouraging learners to actually look for the options that they think are incorrect. So very often there might be a paragraph there and they know for sure that that is not the correct one. So they can then eliminate that, they can remove it from their choices. Why is this important? Well, because that means that they are then left with perhaps like 3 paragraphs to choose from. So it actually maximizes the possibility of them getting a correct response. So encourage them to look for options that they know are definitely incorrect. So even if they are unsure about the correct paragraph, we're increasing the probability or the chances of them actually choosing the correct one. Okay, moving on to a classroom activity for this question type. So I think this is a really nice one. So you can see here, it's defend your summary. So just to go through the instructions with you, so I'll go through these slowly. So you would play a 30 to 90 second recording for the students, again reflecting what they would be exposed to in the actual exam. You would then give each learner or a group, depending on how you want to structure this, depending on how your class sizes are. So you would give them one summary each to each learner or to each group, but remember only one of the summaries is correct. Then everyone must argue that their summary is the correct one. So I can imagine this being very fun, very dynamic. I can imagine learners getting quite passionate about this and wanting to prove that their summary is the correct one, and wanting to show their, you know, their amazing kind of like debating skills, and their ability to defend an argument. So they need to show evidence that theirs is the correct summary from the recording, and they can also use this lovely language here on the right hand side. So this useful language is found in the resources, so you can provide them with this. So as you can see, giving an opinion, agreeing, disagreeing politely, referring to the recording. And one beautiful thing about this activity as well is that this language is not only necessary for this question type. They may well have to, you know, at any stage in their life really, they may well have to defend an argument. They may well have to write an essay where they're having to persuade, or they're having to defend a certain point of view. And so all of this vocabulary is very well suited to those activities as well. So it's really an all-rounder, but I think it's a very fun one. So after all of the students, either individually or in their groups, have defended their summaries, you would then, as the trainer, you would hold a class vote on who the best one, on the best one, which was the best summary, or which was the best defense. And then you can then reveal the correct summary and discuss why this summary fits. Either you can tell the learners why it fits if you feel that they need your support, or you can then direct it back to them. Why do you think this one fits? And hopefully through the actual process of defending their summaries, they will know which one is the correct answer, which one is the correct summary. So there's a nice classroom idea for you there. Okay, and moving on to the last question type that we're going to look at in detail. This time we've got write from dictation. Again, a small overview of this question type. So the prompt length, so what they will hear, is 3 to 5 seconds long. The task, after listening to a recording of a sentence, they need to type the sentence exactly as they hear it. So exactly as they hear it on the recording, they need to type it word for word. The skills assessed here and how it's scored. So again, it's 2 skills that are being tested, listening and writing. And also, again, this time there is no partial credit. So they will either receive a point for each correct word spelled correctly, or they will receive a 0 for each incorrect word or misspelled word. So no partial credit awarded here. It's either correct or it's incorrect. Again, moving on to the sub-skills for this particular question type. So again, we've mentioned before about there being, the main skills being tested. So for this one, write from dictation, it's listening and writing. And then you can see there underneath, you can see the sub-skills for listening, and likewise, you can see the sub-skills for writing. So please take a look at these and try to digest them as best as you can. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at those, at least briefly. Using accurate grammar, spelling and punctuation, very important for this particular question type, because it is right from dictation, so they are expected to write exactly what they hear, and that does include the grammar as they hear it, the spelling as they hear it, and obviously punctuation goes without saying that they should be using correct punctuation. Okay, moving on to common mistakes to look out for this one. So for write from dictation, not being able to take effective notes, and also not checking the answer. So again, what can we get our learners to do? We can get them to note only content words. So this can be a helpful strategy when it comes to effective note taking, just noting down the content words, the main words. Or we can also encourage our learners to use abbreviations. We mentioned this earlier on in terms of note-taking, the note-taking checklist. And then for not checking the answer, we can get learners to start with a capital letter and also finish with a full stop. Now, I know some of you might might think that this is very obvious, it's very blatant. However, you would be surprised, especially under exam conditions, and especially because it's digital. We do sometimes encounter, and I've encountered this in my teaching career as well, situations where students who I know are very capable, they will write essays and they do not start with a capital letter and they do not have any full stops in there. And I think it's just because it's, as I said, it's not like when they're writing, because they're typing away, they lose sight of this. So please make sure that when you are training your learners, that you do emphasize this. A very simple tip, but hopefully it will serve them in the long run. And just it will be there in their mind when they're taking the test. Oh, I must make sure that I use capital letters at the start of a sentence. I must make sure that full stops are in there. So something for them to remember. Okay, and here's a nice activity as well that you can use in your classrooms for this question type. So this activity is listening for keywords and weak forms. So just to take you through the instructions on how you would conduct this activity. So you would play a short audio prompt. Again, this is to reflect what they would find in the actual test. So it's 3 to 5 seconds long. And then you would split the class into 2 groups. So you would have group 1 and you would have group 2. Group 1 would be completing activity A. So you can see that on the right-hand side, so focusing on the content words. And then group 2, they would be completing activity B, which is focusing on weak forms. So weak forms such as auxiliary verbs, articles, things that are sometimes very difficult to hear in spoken language. So each group would listen closely and then they would fill in the missing words in their version. So they would each have a different version and they would fill in the missing words. So let's go on to the following slide. So you could see this is what we are hoping that they would produce. So group 1 would produce the content words, so waiting, station, morning, the words that are emphasized, that are stressed. And then group 2, they would be looking at those weak forms that aren't always fully pronounced. So he's been waiting at the station. Well, actually, I'm not contracting it as much there, but the ones that you don't necessarily hear in normal speech. I was actually saying the words individually there, but if I said it quickly, you would struggle to pick those out. So we're making them more aware of this so that when it comes to writing from dictation, they're able to pick up on these weaker forms and their rendering will be more accurate. Okay, moving on to listening resources that are available for you and for your learners as well. Let's take a look at what we have to offer. So we've got some teacher resources here. So PTE for teachers. You can see here we've got the official guide. I myself have access to this and I think it's an invaluable resource. It's a wonderful resource to have. So you will find in there in-depth guidance on listening question types, other question types as well, of course, that they will find in the PTE exam, but because this session is on listening, you'll find specific guidance on that and also prep strategies as well. So preparation strategies. It's available as an ebook for those trainers who prefer digital format, and it's also available in print as well. And then moving on to other courseware or other books that you might want to use. We've got 2 books here called PTE Expert, 2nd edition. These are very much a pick up and go. So these are a step-by-step approach to preparing learners for the PTE exam. And there are lesson plans in there. It's scaffolded, so you know exactly how to conduct your lesson. I also have access to this as well, and I think it is another invaluable resource in terms of preparing your students and giving them access to examples that they would really find in the actual exam. Again, this is available both in digital format as an ebook and also in print. And then we also have some free teacher resources there as well. So we have some lesson plans that are aligned to each listening question type. So you could use those for your preparation. They could give you some ideas. But obviously, as always, you are the trainers, you are the teachers. So you are welcome to adapt those and use those in any way that you want. By the way, Magda will be providing some links to these resources as I talk through the webinar. So please keep your eyes on the chat because she will be providing some useful links there for you so you can take a look at these in more detail. Okay, and then I wanted to talk to you about something called Smart Prep. So this is new, actually. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it before. So in response to, we're very proud of the relationships that we have with our trainers, with our PT trainers, PTE teachers. And we do very much welcome feedback, and we listen to what they need, and we try to, where possible, satisfy those needs. And so this was in response to that. So it's a preparation portal, specially designed for PT teachers and also test takers as well. So it's not just exclusively for the trainers. Students can also use this portal as well. What kind of things will you find on this portal? For example, there is a listening guided practice test on there. There are four full guided practice tests which contain full listening questions and answers. There is a listening video course with tips and techniques, and there's also a listening tips document in there as well. So plenty of resources that you can dip into and your learners can dip into, depending on their needs, depending on the time they have available as well, but giving them more exposure to the test and how the test works, to make them feel better prepared. Okay, moving on to the following slide here. So some of you might be asking the question or wondering, how can I have access to the Smart Prep portal? So fear no more, I'm about to tell you that now. So all you need to do is you need to create a My PTE account. So again, I'm sure Magda will provide the link for this in the chat. So you create a My PTE account, and then you will find Smart Prep. Once you've done that, you'll find Smart Prep, and then it's as simple as that. You can then start exploring the listening resources, which I've just shared with you. Another nice feature is that you can save any resources that you think are particularly beneficial for you. So you can use a bookmark function there so that next time you log in, you don't have to go trawling through everything or looking through everything. The activities or the resources that are most applicable to you have been bookmarked, and they're there ready for you to use. Also, you can also share it. So you could put together a one-pager if you wanted to for your learners, showing Smart Prep as an added value. So you could show them this is what you have access to. This will really help you with your preparation. You could do this at home, for example, if you don't have time in class. So it could be some homework for them, but all with the ultimate goal of trying to enhance their performance and trying to make them feel more confident about the PTE exam. Okay, I'm moving on to the following slide here. So I just wanted to go through some key takeaways with you before I leave and pass over to Magda. So I'm sure some of the takeaways that you personally have taken are different to these, but I just wanted to give you mine. So as we said from the start, we know that some of these question types are scored for more than one skill. We mentioned at the very beginning about integrated skills. And so that means that listening is more complex than perhaps we sometimes think, or it sometimes appears on the surface. And so we need to make sure that learners understand this. They might think, oh, I watch movies in English and I understand everything, and therefore, my listening skills are very good. They may well think this, and they may well be able to understand movies very well, or they may well be able to listen to songs and understand the lyrics. However, they're not just being scored on their ability to listen. They're being scored on their ability to write as well. Write from dictation, select the correct summary. They're being scored on their ability to take that information and to actually process it. So writing skills, reading skills. So we need to make sure that learners don't lose sight of this. It's not just about being able to understand what you can hear. It's how you then process that and how you can deduct things from that, or how you can write what you hear. And let's not forget the sub-skills. So I paused on those slides so that you could see the sub-skills. And hopefully, as I said, many of you were able to skim those and see that these are also important as well. So skills such as identifying main ideas and supporting points. We had sub-skills regarding accuracy, spelling, punctuation. Again, students might think, oh, it's listening, it's not necessary for me to be able to spell correctly. It is necessary for you to be able to spell correctly because you are being scored on this. And then the last one, which might seem a little cliche, but the more exposure your learners have to these question types, the more confident they will feel doing them under exam conditions. So nobody wants to enter an exam not knowing what to expect. I certainly have had tests in the past given to me where I was not expecting certain questions, or I didn't know how to deal with certain questions because I hadn't been prepared correctly. So your role as trainers is to make sure that your learners are prepared, and you can do that by giving them, as we've shown with those classroom activities, giving them real tangible exercises where they can practice these skills, but in a safe environment. So if they get it wrong, it's not the end of the world, but hopefully over time, their success rate will increase, their accuracy will increase. And it will therefore mean that when it comes to the actual exam, they will go in there feeling a lot more confident and a lot more able to perform proficiently. So those are my key takeaways for you. Once again, I would like to just move on to the following slide here. I would like to thank all of you for joining me today. I appreciate all of you giving me your time. I hope that you found my part of the webinar informative. I hope it sparks some ideas for you as well. And I hope, as I said, there are some nice takeaways there, some ideas that you would like to implement with your own learners in your own classrooms. And yeah, I wish you every success, and I wish your learners every success as well. So handing over to you, Magda.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you very much for that. This was, folks, an important webinar in our I Teach PTE series, because in this part 3 listening section in PTE Academic, there are 8 listening question types. You know now from Dawn's webinar that there are 7 for PTE Core. We really encourage you to review those sub-skills that Dawn drew your attention to, listening for gist, listening for specific information, listening for detail, all of the work on pronunciation that's important, thinking about skills such as paraphrasing, looking at punctuation as well, spelling. All of these little nuggets that Dawn gave you, really take that with you, reflect tonight over dinner or breakfast, whatever time zone that you're in, on, are you doing all of those things? Is your course, is your syllabus holistic? And I hope this webinar has inspired you to reflect a little bit on your teaching, and particularly the classroom activities that, well, we would love you to try them out on your learners, and hopefully we'll meet again and you can provide feedback. There was a very good question from someone in the Q&A about the slides from this webinar, so thank you for that. We don't actually send the slides after the webinar, but my best suggestion is to go to our PT for Teachers website. I've linked it in the chat, and you'll see the teacher webinars series. I'm sure that is where you signed up for the webinar, and if you scroll right to the bottom, you'll see past webinar recordings. So in about a week's time, Dawn's webinar will be up on the website. You'll be able to replay the sections that were most of value to you and review those slides at the same time. Okay, so that's my best suggestion, but thank you very much for your question. Very good. Okay, so Dawn, I'm ready to move on.
Okay.
Okay, so just kind of a quick reminder from me. Dawn did touch on this. The links are all in the chat apart from one, the PT Academic Test Taker School Guide, which is on the very right-hand side. If you do just type that name in, then you'll be able to see it. Now, most of you will be very familiar with these resources already, but if you're not, I'd really, really encourage you to explore them. Smart Prep, preparation resources, a lot of them are direct for test takers, and test takers use them independently of teachers. However, for classroom practice and for setting homework, the free resources are brilliant. The PTE academic course books at B1 and B2 really offer a holistic level of training with regards to language and language skills, some of the elements that Dawn talked to today. The PT official guide for teachers talks about the different question types and the strategies, and the PTE score guide, well, of course, that talks through the rating scales and the traits and the descriptions for each of the traits. So again, super useful. And I know Dawn picked out a few pages from that guide in her slides today. Okay. So next steps, please. Just a few bits of admin before we move to the Q&A. Zoom will send to your email a survey. Once you have given your honest feedback on this session, we are always looking to hear what went well and what could be improved for the next one. I'd like you to then fill in your name to download your certificate, and then you'll be able to send that to your employer or print it for yourself. I really encourage you to sign up for the next webinar.
Do it. Definitely sign up for the next one. Definitely.
It's on speaking, okay, so a speaking skill very close to all of our hearts because it has several extended responses. So we're going to deep dive into those question types a little bit more and look at the rating scales, again, review the traits and the sub-traits required to do really well in those speaking questions. So that's again on a Thursday, the third Thursday of every month is the series, and in July it falls on the 24th of July. So look forward to seeing you then. Okay, so Q&A now. Actually, folks, you've been surprisingly quiet in the Q&A. So Dawn, I got a flurry of highs and hellos from lovely countries around the world, but I haven't had a lot of questions at the moment. There is a statement, I guess, Gaurav. I don't know if you want to just clarify what you mean by retyping your question, but he's saying best score in PTE exam, which perhaps means how do I encourage the best score for my students in listening. So I'm going to answer that. A lot of the challenges that Dawn kind of talk to at the beginning of the webinar is what we need to address. Okay, so I'm not going to follow the same order as Dawn, but what comes to my mind is knowledge on the topic. So as you know, for PT academic, the topics are related to studies, school and university life, for example, and PT core general everyday situations. Students need to be familiar with both, right? Because they need to be able to understand the vocabulary in those contexts to do well in the question. Dawn also talked about a base level of grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, spelling, because even though they are listening, they still have to interpret what they listen in some of the question types. So I'm particularly thinking about right from dictation, right? Even though they may not have picked up every word, they are going to use their knowledge of grammar to be able to formulate that sentence correctly. So there are just a couple of examples. So yeah, in that case, Gaurav, I would just review that slide when that webinar is uploaded, and try and, just reflect on whether you are addressing all of those challenges for learners in your courses. Ola, thank you so much. That's really kind. So I'll share this because I don't think Dawn can see, but she's really enjoyed the training. So thank you, Dawn. Ravita, I'm not sure I understand, to be honest, but yeah, the web links I've shared are for what I think are some of the most useful practical resources from Pearson that teachers can use in the classrooms. Okay, a really good question from Deepika here. Thank you so much. A question on very much on topic. And Dawn, I'll start with this. So a lot of students are only able to remember half of the sentence in right from dictation if the sentence is long. Could you suggest some ideas to tackle this? So let me just begin first of all. I really just want to emphasize what Dawn said in the webinar, okay? Which is to assess if these learners are hearing the content words, right? The content words being usually said louder, more slowly, and not hearing the weaker forms. So if it is the fact that they're hearing those words, that's what's staying in their memory, could you train them to then, using their knowledge of good English grammar, good collocations, to try and fill some of the gaps, and do that training in the classroom? Because I do feel that this is a skill that can be taught. Dawn, I don't know if you want to add to that. Thank you, Deepika. Great question.
It's a great question, and I appreciate the challenge that comes from having to write from dictation. I appreciate that sometimes they might not remember everything. I mean, I particularly, if I were training students, and I noticed that this was a common kind of issue for them, I perhaps would work up to it. So perhaps if you started with sentences for right from dictation and they contained 10 words, for example, and you saw that they struggled with that, perhaps you could maybe give them a sentence with like 5 words to begin with, and then increase it to 6 words and 7 words. So you could help them. When we're not expecting learners to develop these skills, as Magda said, I agree that this is something that can be taught, but we're not expecting it to happen overnight. So you can show some compassion to students as well, and by that I mean, you don't have to give them the full sentence length initially. Perhaps you might want to build up to that, depending on their ability. Another thing that came to mind as well, I remember I used to do this when I was teaching my students pronunciation, is back chaining. So perhaps you might want them to focus on, you said that they don't remember the words towards the end of the dictation. Perhaps you could get them to actually specifically focus on those words towards the end of the dictation and then back chain to make them more aware. Other activities I would do as well is, for example, I would pause the recording. This is all in an effort. I wouldn't be doing this, for the whole academic year, by the way, but as a means to help build confidence. So with the sentence, I would perhaps let them listen to every word individually at first when they're writing from dictation. Then I would do it in like 3-word chunks. So I'd let them listen to 3 words and then write from dictation, another 3 words and then write from dictation. Then perhaps I could play 5 words. And so you're you know, in addition to, as Magda said, you're exposing them to those content words and weaker forms as well. We just want a situation where we're really, really helping to build their confidence, and so I'm not opposed to doing that until they feel like their memorization has improved, their confidence, because I think this all goes hand in hand. I feel like if you're not confident, you're probably so stressed and anxious that you do miss words towards the end because your brain is elsewhere. So if we can really, really help build that confidence, then I think hopefully they will be able to remember more. So a few little ideas from me there, Magda.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Great question, Deepika. I would definitely look for back chaining as a technique, but some really great ideas from Dawn there to vary the activities in the classroom for dictation. Okay, so Kushi, thank you. Very sweet comment. I think we must have met in Ahmedabad when I was in India earlier in the year. It's so lovely. I can't see you, but hello. And Desi, final thing. Hello, could you give me a suggestion in summarize spoken text? Is it possible if learners only catch word by word, not a sentence? So Desi, it is really, really, really important just to encourage them to write full sentences. Yes, it is a must. So always encourage full sentences. We want to be demonstrating good English as teachers, sentence structure, and then encouraging our learners to do the same in response to that question. Okay, wonderful to see Dawn today. I can't see the rest of you, but I know you're there. Thank you for your attendance. We are repeating the session one more time today, but for now, I wish you a very, very pleasant rest of the day, and hopefully I'll see some of you in July. Okay, all the best. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Magda. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye. Thank you.